minute here to introduce Kehne, who joined the Conservation Northwest in 2010 after a 31 career with the U.S. Department of Agricultural Natural Resources Conservation Service. Thank you for your service. Jay hopes to put his experience working with ranchers and farmers combined with his love of Washington shrub step habitat to work helping to connect and protect important habitats for a variety of species in the arid lands of our state. So excited to hear about virtual fencing. I've been waiting for something like this to come along for a very long time. So with that, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. So can everybody hear me? And my voice doesn't project as well as I think, but and right before I came down here to drive down, I live in Omak. I got off my tractor, stepped in the pothole. I don't know if I broke my ankle or sprained it. So if there's two reasons you'll find me just fall off and fall over up here. One, the ankle, or two, I took some Advil on the way down. I think it was AM, PM or something.
Oh my goodness.
So,
Do you want to
try to get
sit?
through this. So, as she mentioned, I worked with Natural Resource Conservation Service for 31 years, working with farmers, ranchers, soil scientists, wildlife biologists, the district conservationists in Yakima and Lake Tahoe, and finished out as an RCD coordinator, and always worked with conservation districts. I mean, that was just my bread and butter. My dad was an NRCS engineer in the day, and he brought me up to understanding what conservation districts are. So I have so much respect for what you do. And as I look out, I'm just so pleased that you're not all old and in retirement. This is the coolest youngest crowd.
The second way.
It says the old people that are still hanging on sometimes, we've got to get out of the way and let you take over. It's really encouraging to see this. Yeah, so when I hit 55, Conservation Northwest was recruiting me to go to work for them. And they're a group,
Nice.
a nonprofit group based out of Seattle, but does have staff out in Eastern Washington. And I was hired on to work with wolf recovery, which was a tough subject at the time. Wolves have just come back in the state. I loved what I did, but it was full of conflict. And so when they offered me the chance to move into this new program we have, which is called Shrub Step, it's the Sagelands Heritage Program. It's looking at the shrub step on the east slope of the Cascades and all the programs that go along with that. I jumped at it. I love it. It put me right back into all my conservation district friends and friendships and the work that I've done all my career was working in that area of Eastern Washington, and particularly the east slope of the Cascades, the shrub step just to the east, and that run from Oregon put up to Kelowna, BC. So we didn't have the capacity to move out into the whole area. But anyway, we're working in all kinds of programs where our organization connects, protects, and restores habitat and wildlands for wildlife. So, make a long story short, after the Pearl Hill Cold Spring fires, I'm up wandering around Douglas County, just looking at the damage that was done. You know, 450,000 acres burned overnight, and it was just a terrible loss of the shrub step habitat and to ranchers and their bottom line. And anyway, I stopped at a friend's house, dug a pool up there, and I said, "What are you gonna do?" He goes, "I don't know, but I'm not rebuilding the fence." He goes, "There's this new thing called virtual fence." I'm like, "What's that?" I hear it so many times now. Is that like the dog fence? And I asked that, and he goes, "I don't know. I don't know that much about it, but I've been reading it, hearing about it, and I can't find out any information. Maybe you can look into it." So I grabbed, wonder what that is. And I started researching it. I found a guy in Montana that had applied, I think, the first virtual fence in the US with legal Bartholomew. And I called him. He goes, "Oh yeah, this is pretty cool stuff. You know, it's got its problems and whatnot, but it's great. You know, I can't believe what we can do and what it means to the future." And so then I started saying, "Well, how do I get a hold of who makes it?" I said, "Well, it's just one company right now called Vence, VENCE." And he said, "Give him a call." I go, "Hey, can we contact you and have to give a talk on it and find some interest?" "Sure." He said, "Oh, I'm happy to." So all of a sudden I entered this little like brotherhood of people that were just interested in this virtual fence thing, and I got a hold of Vence. And the first person I talked to, they said, "Oh yeah, what do you got?" I said, "Well, I don't know, but explain it to me." So they did. As I started to learn about it, I got more and more excited, because as I started to understand it, I see it as something that has the capacity to change so much for ranchers' bottom line, for habitat connectivity issues with fences and wildlife, for proper grazing rotational on the ground. It just has an amazing potential. And I'll say up front, I'm not an expert on this. There's people in the room that are actually applying it. people I know that are here, and there's conservation districts that have been involved in this, Foster Creek Conservation District, Okanagan Conservation District, with a partnership. We felt as a nonprofit, we could serve as a catalyst to really start lighting a fire, to get people knowing about it, interested in it, and then make decisions if they want to get into it. So with that, we'll just open it up as we go. We have enough time for questions as we go. I don't prefer that because at the end you forgot the question and I forgot.
Yeah.
That's good. So go ahead, and if you have a question, let me know. I love it. This is a cow. They don't know that, but it has a collar on, and that's a huge part of the system. This is actually the first application of virtual fence in Washington State. It's on what's called the Zaglinski property up in the Tunk Valley in northern Okanagan County. And this is property conservation bought. It was $10 million, $4 million, 10,000 acres. And then we gave it to the Caldwell Confederated Tribe. It's kind of a cool thing to do. And then they still have it leased out for grazing to a private landowner who came up to me and said at this big celebration and said, hey, what's this virtual fencing here? But now I knew a little bit more about it. So I said, here's what I know. And I go, yeah, I would really like to do this. It would fit in with how I want to manage this land and how I want to get the long-term lease on this land by being proactive in a new system of fences, because he had some fences burn as well and other fires. So let's see, I'm not pushing the wrong button. One door there. And no, get backwards, go up. And go down. Yes. There we are. Thank you. So, I mean, really, this is kind of how I view it. But over 100 years ago, the biggest invention on the West that was going to affect cattle and cattle grazing and how people use the land was barbed wire fence. You know, and it's had its day, it's had its time, and it's still, there's use for it. But I think what we're seeing now, some of the tools we used back then as well, a belt to know where your cow is. Now we have GPS units in these collars. You know, barbed wire fences to subdivide your pasture and do a good job of rotational grazing. Still a need for some of those things. And moving your herd off of a horse. And you can still do that. I'm not saying, hey, this is going to be replaced, but you can move a herd now with a moving fence if you need to. So it's a simple system. It's not that costly. The first thing ranchers ask me is, well, this has got to cost more than regular fence. It doesn't. It costs a lot less. And especially at scale, once you get up to a bigger scale with enough acres and enough animals, then it's very cost effective. So take the tower, and see that in the middle of the picture. They started calling them towers, and people freak out because they think it's a radio tower. It's only 20 foot tall. So I renamed the rabbit hutch with a flagpole because it seems to look more like that. It's not that big a thing. And now they're actually calling them base stations. This is a thing so people don't get this idea that it's a huge feature on the landscape. It's not. And then the tower needs cell phone service at it, but it only needs one bar to operate with very low cell phone service, which is to get all the information back to your home computer, back to your system, back home, so you can manage that herd from living in the fences and with moving them and with all the things you can do with the herd manager software. It takes a collar that goes around the neck. Those go on at usually in the spring when you've got them in the chute for other activities. They lease the collar, so they're constantly being upgraded, and they don't need to buy them and be stuck with an outdated collar. So they lease for $50 a year, and that includes the battery. The battery is small there on the side. It runs about 6 to 8 months, depending on how much you use it, how much it wakes up. So the battery is going to activate when it approaches a fence. You put on the landscape. It's, you know, not really on the landscape. It's out there virtually, and it will beep shock. And so the more that animal tests that, the less life it will have in that battery. But typically 6 to 8 months. There's a question.
What is the range of the towers?
So a tower goes 10 miles out in radius if it was perfectly flat.
Okay.
So this is an example I like to use. If you put a mile of fence around, if you fence off a section, 640 acres, that would cost $20,000 a mile roughly, so $80,000 to put barbed wire fence around 600 acres. Now you can keep cows in or out at 600 acres with $80,000. With $80,000, you get 3 towers and power 500 head for 3 years, and covers probably 80,000 acres. And put as many fences as you want, wherever you want, take them down tomorrow, put them back up the next day. Manage that as you learn how this process works, is what it's all about. So economically, it's there, especially at scale. But topography is the enemy of this system. So you never have flat unless you're from Kansas or Nebraska. I can make fun of it because I was born in Nebraska. But we don't have that kind of topography. You know, we have where you have to line of sight, they have to put towers in a situation where they can cover most of the ground, not all of it, but most.
You talked about herding cattle by moving and vertically. How effective is that?
And I'm gonna right up front say, I don't know all the answers to the on the ground questions, but I attend a herd manager workshop that's every Tuesday from events. And people that are applying this on the ground are calling in with questions and things that don't work or do work. That's the place to learn a lot. If you want to, you know, just listen in on those, I can give you the link to get there. But not that's a question, I rambled.
How effective is it at actually herding?
Okay, it's called a moving fence, a virtual moving fence. It can work, so they put it at the speed of grazing, which is like a foot a minute, and they can actually, you can set it up to move all those behind them. So they're getting the beep, 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 and so they keep moving, but it's gonna use a lot of battery life because it's being activated constantly. It's theoretically works. I haven't talked to ranchers yet that have used it and made it work. They've talked about it on there, so I know people are trying it. Yep.
So once they cross that line, does it just continuously shock them until they come back? over the
No.
line?
The way it works is once they go through a BDB shock, it doesn't shock them coming back to the herd. Okay. So they typically say, you don't have to cattle the calves, you know, they can go through and come back. If you're brave enough, you could collar a bull, but it's probably not gonna make a difference. It's not gonna listen to it anyway. I had a gal up in the DC when I was giving this talk, she said, well, you didn't put it in the right place. I'm not really paying enough to do that, guy. So. Yeah, typically you're gonna collar the mother cows and not the calves. First off, it's not recommended even by events as a perimeter fence. For various reasons. If your neighbor doesn't have collars on their cows, they're gonna come into your pastures if you don't have, everybody have collars. And just for, if you're along a major highway or whatnot, that still might be the right choice for a fence as opposed to, these are primarily for the cross fences need to get that rotational grazing system working however you want to make it.
If you did have, say, a landowner next to you that didn't have a virtual fence, and one of these serve multiple landowners, or they could work together?
Yep. In fact, landowners that we work with that have purchased them, and I'll show you some. First slide. There's the signal that's out there can be used by anybody. And
Okay,
if you took advantage of that signal, you're relying on your neighborhood to keep the tower up and running. So where we've cost shared on this through some programs that I'll explain, we suggested, no, if we're cost sharing on it, and you're paying a portion of that, you should have a tower. But you don't have to. And so down the road where I see this going is more of a co-op type of thing, if somebody pays for the signal and then ranchers lease into it or buy into it, but that's down the road. First, you just gotta get people used to it, using it, finding out the things that work and don't work. And actually, Quick Deck County's thinking about doing that. County commissions are thinking about doing a tower system for the whole county. Okay. Whoa. In the back.
We always send out signals with battery life, so they study plastic tape on the variability of the tell you the battery.
Yeah, you can know from your home, and the events company tends to track a lot of these projects too. And sometimes they notify you that your battery is low, because they're watching a lot of the projects, although they're getting enough projects in the ground now. I don't know how much longer they keep doing that. They're getting harder to get a hold of, I would say. Unless they can talk about that she's actually on her ranch, they've applied. Anything I don't know, point her later and talk to her about that. Okay, so $12,500 US for a tower that's installed, Conservation Northwest. I've got 2 staff people. We've been putting in think we've had our hands on every tower that went in the state so far, and there's about 20 and more coming. Just because we wanted to have the idea, we don't know what it's really like. How long does it take to put one up? That's the kind of questions we get from ranchers. And again, college lease for $50 a year. I'm gonna move on. All right. There's a tower on the left that's installed. There's what's inside the tower. Basically, it's the electronics. It's some marine batteries that hold the charge. And then on the top of it comes the, excuse me, this is Leo out in Montana. He was the first person that I know of that to put it on in the US. And literally 2 years ago, this is how fast it's moving. It was Leo, and then there might have been a couple others down in Colorado, New Mexico, and then Mike Wilson in Washington was the 5 or 6 that had started it. And now there's over 140 across most of the western US, but some down in the southeast as well. Eventually, after you get the towers up, the collars on, where it really happens is in herd manager. So this is the software that allows you to draw virtual fences. It allows you to manage multiple herds, mark important locations, exclude areas. You can have exclusionary fences or inclusionary fences. From a conservation standpoint, wildlife standpoint, we got excited about the exclusionary fence. From my NRCS training, I also got very excited about the rotational grazing benefits. So I always felt, I went to my first Allen Savory workshop in 1978 in Ellensburg. And I went, cool, this is going to change everything because now we can really manage these herds and fast rotational grazing and bite the grass ones and all this cool stuff. It just never seemed to happen. And I believe why it never seemed to happen was it was too damn expensive to build all the fences. But then I went to electric fence and you got all this labor cost. So for me, I felt that the advantages in rotational grazing to the landowner and to the production of whatever you're producing, beef, and to the earth, because I'll talk a little bit more about this, but there's a carbon sequestration side of this that we can talk about. Excites me, and it gives landowners now a tool that is affordable, and it's going to take time to learn how to use it. And it's going to change maybe some of your ideas of the land you graze and how you might want to graze it. And I think the only thing that's going to be hard to keep up with, and I'm hearing this already from some ranchers that I know, is, oh my gosh, I got to get into NRCS and get some water development stuff going because I can make so many pastures now, but I still got to have water in each one. So it's very, very interesting how it's developing. Each collar will hold up to 16 moves and not need to be in the vicinity of a tower to still have that move work. So the cow with the collar is near the tower, and you put your moves in, you say, on June 3rd, I want this fence to drop. Whether that cow's in a ditch or a gully or anywhere where the signal's not going to get to it, it will still work. It'll still beat shot, and it will still drop on that date. The cows move to the fresher pasture, you say on June 8th, put it back up, and it will come back up. So that's why you don't have to have complete coverage to make it work. And I'll show you how that works in a second, how you figure out your coverage.
So you still have to have a person component when you drop that fence to make them move, because they may learn it's there and not want to naturally move it if that makes sense.
Right, I think that's kind of herd dependent. Every herd has a different mindset. You know, some folks that I've talked to say they know that they've been doing it this way for years. And that's almost typical how it gets set up. They're going to put a virtual in where some other fences burned up, and they're trying to see how it works. So they kind of have them in the same rotational grazing they've always had. So the cows know where to go at about the same time. But yes, then sometimes they have to go out and just push them and move them. But the idea is, as you set this up more on a faster rotational grazing system, I think some of the stuff I've seen back in the Montana stuff where we went to workshops on this, they know when to go, they want to go. But that's each herd is different.
Is there a manual setting on the collar? Like, can the person running the herd manager see the cows getting into a ravine and those that are probably sitting there and manually go in and tell it, hey, buzz it, make it without flowing from there?
Yeah, so each collar is a GPS unit. So when you look at your screen at home, you see your cows, an icon of your cows. It's not real time, what is it? It's a delay of, I don't know, a minute or so. But when they step, eventually you see them move. And if they get out of the fence, you know they're out. And if the signal's not working, they turn a different color. So you can manage that from your home base, basically. If you say you had 5 cows that didn't move, you either could send somebody out there to move them, or chance it that you could get them to move with a moving fence. You know, it's just, you have to figure out which way works the best for you. Most people go out and move them and then make sure and drop the fence to move them and put it back up. To exclude, you know, we start thinking about things like, let's exclude from sharp-tailed sage-grouse lek sites, for instance, just as an example of how easy it is to keep cows out of sensitive areas, to exclude from a riparian area. So that to me has huge implications because of how many ranchers have had to put in riparian fences because they got a DOE complaint or whatnot. And this way, it's cheap, and you can actually set up watering slots that can be moved daily if you want. Whereas, think of every fence that you've ever seen built, it's there for a lifespan of what, 20 years? So FSA puts a lifespan on it. You don't have to have lifespans on these fences anymore. You can change them as you go, as you learn more about how this technology can be blended with how you can raise this land in the best way. Then I thought, what if you, because going back to my wolf days, I was thinking, wow, some of the biggest problems on Forest Service leases with cattle and ranchers always occurred when the cattle happen to get into and or near the den or rendezvous areas. That's a simple fix, just fence out the den and rendezvous area. Then I got to thinking, what if we put a virtual collar on a wolf? And then my boss said, no, man, you're messing with nature. You can't do that. Think about it. And you have the alpha wolf, and they get shot going after some cows, and they'd all howl and run away, and all the wolves would go, well, I'm not going in there. Yeah.
I have a question about that. For the Forest Service leases, do you see the Forest Service ever requiring these for the leases just to protect those sensitive areas or riparian areas?
That is a wonderful question. I've been thinking about that a lot.
Yeah.
We're working with.
Can you repeat the question, please?
The question is, do you ever see the Forest Service leasing their land, requiring a virtual fence in places to protect different sensitive wildlife or whatnot, or just to manage the ground properly?
Yeah.
I don't know. We've got a pilot project that we're helping fund. Okanagan National Forest, it's Cup Creek Fire up at Twist.
Yeah.
Burns, I don't know, 30,000 acres. They're about to spend $3 million to rebuild fences. And our staff came and told them about virtual fence, and they go, crap. So for $60,000, they're gonna put in all the fences needed. The leasee, the landowner, we help buy the collars for them for the first couple of years. And we don't know yet how that's gonna play out. I mean, if you put public dollars into the virtual fence, and Forest Service bought the towers, it could be a thought process that says, yeah, you should require the sensitive areas are fenced out.
Yeah.
But it's not my decision to make. It's Forest Service has to do some thinking about that. Any federal agency or state agency has to do some thinking about what they're going to require. In a way, some of the problems on Forest Service land with public land with private grazing has been, well, they trash it. You didn't move around like you're supposed to. Well, we can't. The trees fall down and bust all the fences, so we can't get them rotating like we're supposed to, and they hang out down by the riparian area. There's almost a point where you said with this, if it worked in a particular area, there's not many excuses left. So does the Forest Service actually have to come to a higher standard and say, well, now that we have a new way to manage livestock on public lands, what are we going to do? But it's not my call. We'll see how they develop it. I got some other stories from some other agencies that are doing stuff too. Yeah.
Yeah, so on that note, all of these are understand about this as well for practice, for one thing. Like if you want to access funds through those organizations, you'll be able to do a process like this further on.
I went to DC 3 weeks ago for the Farm Bill fly-in. And I said, I gotta go meet with NRCS stop that, stop virtual fence. It's gotta be a standard practice. And if it's not, why aren't they on it? They're on it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Because we're doing a project with fencing on riparian areas, so, and we know this technology exists, but we're going to improve Department of Health, and we want to see if we could do virtual fencing, but knowing that practice is starting to get some new doing that all here. so.
NRCS can be a little slow to get through their action standards, but they understand it. They know the potential. The interesting thing, it's not gonna be a fencing practice, it's gonna be a proper grazing use, I think it's 328.
Sure.
Can't remember. They're saying, no, if we're gonna pay for this, we want a certain outcome out of it, and it's not gonna be just to put more animals on the landscape, we wanna see that if more animals are going on, it's in a process that the earth is taken care of. Alyssa, we gotta come.
Just so you're all aware, we did establish virtual fencing as a practice of the commission. So that first, project that Jake shared, part of that was funded with NRI. So if anyone has questions on any of that, have your regional manager, talk to me. Happy to help you out.
Again, this is just talking about using this exclusionary, using inclusionary. There's 8 universities doing research on this now. One of those studies has been, how is it working to build fire breaks? You know, put them in a narrow zone, graze it down more, take some of that fire fuel out of the system and actually build a fire break with cattle using virtual fence that you can then drop and do away with. It's not this expense to go out and build, you know, $20,000 a mile barbed wire fence. There's also research going on to graze some of the invasive species in the spring that you can maybe knock back, like cheatgrass, and nobody can put a fence around it, you know, it's just too much money. Put them in, knock it down, take them out. So the ideas of what you can use this for, just the more you think about it, you'll all come up with some good ones, I'm sure.
Tell me where that picture's from.
That is, Okanagan County, Okanagan River, but I'm not sure what angle it's from.
That's the Okanagan River,
I believe so.
not the Snoqualmie.
Not what?
Snoqualmie.
Oh, it might be. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, the mountains in the background look more like some. So this is just a quick example, but you know, Mike and Joy were the best people to do this that I could ever imagine because they loved it, they got into it, they had their problems with it, they worked through it, but they were also new to it enough, and Fence didn't have that many customers, they really got good service, and so they were calling them constantly. I bet they were on the phone with Vince every other day and getting answers and how to use this and whatnot. And so this is just an example I thought of, but they gave a lot of workshops. So when we had other ranchers wanting to get into it through our shut step proviso, which is now Wizardry, they would come to their house and sit around and they, on a big screen TV, they would show how you can build a fence, show how you can move a herd. So all of that was kind of happening as this was developing. But you can kind of see that 25 miles of virtual fence can cost $20,000 an acre or a mile. So that's over $500,000. And 300 cow-calf pairs could be about $64,000 with 2 towers put up. And cost, and once they're up, they don't have to stay there. You know, if you learn something, like Mike and Joy they're actually the only ones in Washington have been through a full grading season. So most of our other projects are hitting this year with their first grading season. So they learned a ton. And now they're already saying, like, in some of the pastures that they thought that they were being used a certain way, they weren't. Because you can watch your cows, you have a grazing season for each cow, you can show where they went the whole season, you can show where the whole herd went the whole season. And they're like, wow, we gotta divide that up into 3 different units and push them into different units, because we're not getting that forage out of it that we thought we were getting at. And that's their place. That's what their screen looks like at home. Up in the left corner is one of the towers. They located another tower about 8 miles to the southeast on a neighbor's property because they could shoot back. They could cover this roughly 10,000 acres, and this isn't the whole property, with 2 towers. And that's kind of typical. And you don't usually need 20 towers. You need 2 or 3 or whatever, depending on your acres and your topography. The red cow in this picture that hasn't sent a signal in so much time, you set that so you know that could be it's in a ditch or a gully, that could be collar dropped off, that could be cow dead. There's a bunch of things that could be, but you know something's wrong there. Or the battery could have gone out, but you have a signal, a readout that would tell you that. On the left-hand side of the screen here, that has a little bit of a topography break. When you start doing virtual fence, they say, first thing you do is you put your cows in a fenced area and put a virtual fence over it and you let them train themselves. So they see the real fence, they hear the auditory, they get shot, they connect, and they they say in 48 hours, about half the herd will have it figured out, in 72 hours, more like 90% will have it figured out. It just gets better over time. But there's always gonna be, like any fence system, there's gonna be cows that just don't get it and get out, you know? And so that's why these are cross fencing, and that's why your perimeter fence is still there. Eventually, cows typically want to come back, but if it doesn't, like in Mike's case, he says, oh yeah, we got 5 cows, they're all hamburger now. So I don't want to deal with them, they're out all season long. He goes, we took care of that problem. And he, like in this, you can't see when I point this, can you? Where the big bunch of cows are on the left, that's a pasture that he's gonna divide into about 4 different pastures this year. He thought he had it nailed with its grazing, and they all hung out in a certain spot. You know, the whole grazing. He looked at his map this winter and goes, oh my gosh. On the left-hand side of that, you see a double red line, that's a double vertical fence. He chose not to build a new perimeter fence there, it had burned up. I said, I'm just gonna put a double one, and none of them have gotten that. So if people are thinking about how to make this work, trying it out, adjusting the things that are working or aren't working. Yeah,
So what you're saying is we're gonna start breeding for virtual fence smart cows.
I don't know. I know Mike's thinking that. When we talk a lot, he says, you know, one of the biggest things is that I sleep so well now. I used to worry every night about where my cows were, what fences are down. And because he's about half an hour from these pastures, this is where he's raised for many years. Because I check it before I go to bed, I sleep like a baby, it's great. I check it in the morning over coffee, and you know, and it shows you things. So, so 2 years ago, as I know, there's about 5 virtual fence projects in the US. Fence is the only company making it. This is where they are now. It's about 120, and I think there's 20 more planned this year at least. So it's just taken off. We were at a conference in Tucson on connectivity, and John Easiat, he's the sales rep for virtual fence for events. And I spent a lot of time with him and talking and whatnot. And if you guys are interested in this, he's going to be at the OMAC Stampede Beer Garden August 10th with me. Because he was, I've seen a rodeo. So anyway, you can go see him at the beer garden. But for instance, one of these dots in New Mexico is BLM. And there was a presentation by the BLM manager that she came and gave a presentation. She was so excited about it. She couldn't stop talking. She was like an hour over, everybody was listening. They've got, I think it's 100,000 acres, 4,000 cows collared, and like 7 different leases that they're all in the virtual fence first grading season this year. So again, that's going to play out in a number of different ways, some successes, some failures. They'll learn a ton. They'll start to figure out this whole thing of, well, now that we have the capacity to really put a fence system on the ground, we can actually graze this a whole lot different than in the past. What are they going to require? And BLM can be an interesting one because they usually don't require any. It's kind of free game. Yeah.
Are these virtual fences being made to for other species, or is it just cows at this point?
They're just cows. I think they were thinking about sheep. They haven't had a whole lot of time to adjust and go that direction, because right now it's cows. And these are just some of the other types of maps that you can see looking at the software. In the upper right is a dot. Oh wow, so one of these things. And there's no caps around, dang it. So this area here, you know, that's individual cows with collars, and this individual cows where they're supposed to be. So something going on here. This is individual cows and where they spent the day. This is again, this is a double virtual fence, but they felt they could use that to perimeter that them in there. And this is cow that went to the first one, but not the second one. And everything else is hanging in the fence, but also lining up along it. You know, these are the things this rancher might at some point decide to do this a little differently. This is just on variable landscapes here from cows in Arizona. Whoops. This is in Colorado. I hear a lot of times I can't work where I ranch, where I lease ground. It's too mountainous and too rough. John will tell you they haven't found a place yet that it won't work. It may not be as 100% in some places, but topography, trees don't matter. Vegetation does not interfere with the signal. It's just a topography driven thing. So you've got to find the right location for your towers, and I'll show you how that's done. And then you're gonna have some gaps. But then you might change your rotation from how you used to do it because you know you have a gap at that time of year, and so you might put them in there at a little different time. There's a way to get around the gaps that occur. This is can't remember what this is, but it just shows the difference. You can assign different colors to your cows for different meanings. I think this one was the signal hadn't been heard back at the computer for a day or a week or 2 weeks. So you get kind of some warning ideas about what's going on out there. And they could all be just down in the gully, I mean, Royal down there. Probably called it. This is tower assembly for 12,500. That's installed. So they send people up to build them. We tended to like to help on this because we learn a lot and we can talk to people about the process. Takes about 2 people, probably a morning, to put together 2 towers in the shop. That's how you normally do it. This is the tower, everything's put together that's ready to go out to the field. They can be lowered, put on a back of a pickup or a 4-wheeler. They're not that big, and then you finish the project out on the ground by putting the batteries in. It can be put into soft dirt, hard bedrock. Actually, the installation on hard bedrock is actually easier, but you're still using a power jackhammer drill. And then you can just use anchor bolts, expansion bolts, as opposed to in the dirt, you have to put in kind of a thing that backs up and pulls against the dirt, but they can be put pretty much on any surface. These are the first 2 towers that went up in Washington. This one's up in the Tunk, and this one is across the valley shooting back. And then there's guide wires that stabilize that tower. Everybody eventually asks, can you put them on a trailer? Vents doesn't particularly like it because it messes with their predictions, how well it's going to send the signal out. And if you move them somewhere where they haven't checked the signal, you might not have coverage. And so they're trying to help you track down why it isn't working, but they don't really, they have to go through another process to see where that news location is sending the signal. That takes some time. But like John said, probably about 60% of these towers are on trailers. Oh, they know it, they're moving them around, trying to save money.
We have a question from online. Can multiple landowners or herds utilize a single tower? And is there a limit to the number of paddocks that can be defined in a single virtual system?
So yeah, multiple landowners can use a single tower. Again, your herd manager is yours. No one else can see what you're doing with your herd. But if you do that, you don't have control or you aren't maintaining that tower necessarily. And that's your good group of ranchers that are all going to maintain it together. So that's not a problem. And what was the second part of the question?
Is there a limit to the number of paddocks that you can define?
Yeah, the limit is you cannot confine the cows into where they're getting deep shock or whichever way they turn. So other than that, the answer is no, put as many fences as you need to. But for instance, the old concept that Alan Savory had of the spokes and the wheel and the water in the middle would not work virtually. Because of those coming together real close down into the water source, that cow is going to be getting deep shock kind of wherever which way they turn her. And then just go through it. So somebody thought up the idea, well, we're just going to hard fence out so far from the water. And then virtual out here, they got more room down into that work. Maybe ranchers and farmers innovative. They can figure it out one way or another. If you throw an obstacle at them, they seem to find a way. And this is the solar panel going on top. I forget, I think it's 7 or 8 days, even, the total rain and whatnot, you still have signal from that and power from the solar panel. Might be more than that, 10 days, I believe. Just to show you, in this picture, about as far as you can see, not the final ridge in the background, but everything before that is covered by this one tower. That is not all the ground that this person raises. That could be another rancher way across the valley that could take advantage of that signal if they chose to. This is collaring the cattle. You know, most people would be doing that in the spring when other things are happening, shots and vaccines and whatnot. They're making improvements on this process all the time. The collar carries the chain carries the shock, not the collar. It doesn't have to poke them in the neck hard like a lot of collars, like a dog collar. The chain's carrying the shock, and then it's got a top chain at the top where it doesn't short out. And the hardest thing is for the rancher to get used to putting it on how tight. You know, if it's not tight enough, you might lose a few collars out in the woods or the field. And you don't want it too tight, but like again, Mike in his second year had it down pretty fast. It initially it added about, well, there's confusion about all this, and, you know, added a couple minutes to everything in the chute. Now I think we got it down to 30 seconds. If you've got your collars ready, if you ID them to your tag, so everything's in sync, you know what cow is loose out when the signal comes into you. So you've got to mesh those together. And if you've got the batteries already put in.
So do they have a leather section so if they get caught in something, it'll break off?
Where the chains that connect to the collar, there's 2 metal rings and they're breakaway at 650 foot-pound. And this is the this is the first cow collared in Washington. We were all excited taking pictures, and he opened the chute, and the cow put her head down and caught that on the brisket bar and pulled back. And the cow was about 2.5 years old. And she ran out. He goes, "That's not good." He ran her through again, another collar, same thing, put her head down, tacked up, bam, collar was flying that way. Michael, all right, I'm done with that, got his welder, and cut it with a brisket, catching on the little brisket part thing. Cut that off, no problem, got them all colored. But yeah, it will break away. That was before she lowered her head through 50 feet. Anyway, it's not really all that cumbersome. And Dr. Lester, if you want to know the real truth about collaring, because your story may be different than what I'm showing you. So talk a little bit about current projects. In the black outline here is the Mike Wilson property. The green and blue signal is what is covered by virtual fence with those 2 towers. The red dots are the 2 towers. You can see there's considerable ground outside of what he was trying to get covered that also has coverage. That covers 60,000 acres. His grading is about 15,000. I have 280 cow-calf pairs. The cost is 25,000 for the towers, 12,500 for 280 collar leases, and he's got over 50 miles of virtual fences on 13 pastures. So just take 50 miles times 20,000, that's $1 million. He did it for 37,000. Yeah, and that's 1 year of progress. Okay.
Sorry, you already said the price, want to verify. It needs cell coverage, but just like the variant, not like you said, I think you said 1 bar would do it.
Yeah.
Is that right?
And you just have to be able to check. And so usually they can find where it will work. Yeah.
So the entire area doesn't need 1 bar, just where the tower is.
Yeah, just for the tower. Okay. So other projects, so now up in the top right corner, up there, that's the Wilson property, and those 2 towers are covering all that ground. So then along comes Alyssa, and Foster Creek Conservation District, and Okanagan Conservation District, and Pearl Hill Cold Springs Fires had a program come through from the legislature for $4.5 million for, bouncing back from those fires. And one aspect of that was wildlife friendly fence. So if fence is burned, you can go to FSA or NRCS and get fences rebuilt. So in that program, we said, well, let's push for some wildlife friendly fences, smooth wire, top and bottom, and different heights. So we get landowners an option, put in a little more friendly fence for wildlife. And then right about then, virtual fence came along, and I was working on the committee, and other people in this room were on those committees. And we said, the most wildlife friendly fence ever is one that's not there at all. We should be cost sharing a virtual fence. So it took some convincing and a lot of work, but yeah, And it's all new, so it's kind of like, how can we put money out on something that's not tried? But anyway, we did the right thing. And so we had a sign up, and in those Cold Spring Pro Hill areas, we had some other folks sign up to do towers and virtual, and those are the ones that are all hitting the ground right now. Cows are out on the ground in those projects, and Leslie's one of those lucky folks, and some other folks in Okanagan County, some other ranchers in Douglas County. And then they've opened up that funding source, and it's not the whole 4.5 million, it's actually 1.5 million that was available for this capital funds, and they've done good work to put into that money again, and I haven't heard if we got it.
Yeah.
Ah,
It's coming, it's a partnership with DFW, DNR, Commission, and all the partners. And initially it was coming through DFW to the commission, to districts, now it's coming straight to the commission, districts, so. That administration will flow a lot more easily.
and they also opened it up to other burn areas other than just Pearl Hill and Cold Spring, so
Yeah.
you can talk about.
Or even areas that haven't burned, to make that landscape more resilient to fire when it comes.
Yep.
Then you have to rebuild fence.
One thing to know is that Vince was a startup company. They weren't in it to make the money. If you read up on how they were founded, they were in it to save the earth. And how they thought they could save the earth was to do a really good job of rotational grazing that actually put more carbon back into the soil and not doing a good job of grazing. And so that's their founding mentality, why they put this whole product together as a startup company. We were always worried that they may not make it, but shoot, now what do we do? We got all this money out there, and nobody's gonna put towers up or anything. But they got bought out last summer by Merck, a pharmaceutical company, and everybody,
wow.
oh, well, they have an animal husbandry division, and that's why they're getting into this. And also some of the, I think, the carbon sequestration that's gonna come along with it helps some of these big companies. So now they've got back. I'm not worried at all that they won't be around in 20 years. I'm hoping that there'll be some competition at least, developed, and there's other companies that people can choose from, because they're the only ones right now. So all these other projects down here in black were shrub step proviso, now called WISRI, Washington Shrub Step Restoration Resilience Initiative. And that's the ones in black. And then this one was one that, this one we bought the towers and just gave them to Mike, so there you go. This one we put in for a National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant for $250,000 and got it. As well as a whole bunch of aspects of working with the Conservation District for outreach and to tell the story, to monitor some of the effects of the vertical fence on wildlife, as well as creative videos that we can share the Washington story with everybody, and that's being done right now. And then 5 towers here on about 35,000 acres. And this is the landowner that I initially talked to that said, I'm not building any more fence. Go find a way to get into this virtual stuff. So he just put out this spring too. NIFWIP is kind of a slow funder. We got it last year, but finally we got permission to use the money. And so that's going in. So it's all these towers and these towers and these towers, everything in green and blue has covered. So it's probably 4 times the land base that we are actually implementing rotational grazing systems using virtual fence on. And my house, right, my house is right there. If I put on a shock collar, I could be beat and shot. And I'd have to pay a nickel for it. What do you think? And again, 350,000 acres covered, 6 ranchers, total cost about 400,000. I don't know how many miles of fence that would add up to. Yeah, and then this was just showing that other project down here. And the interesting thing on this project, they're not just using it to create shrub step habitat. Doug has a process where he's doing a lot of regenerative farming, he's doing cover crops, he's bringing cows in, he really wants to get into this fast rotational grazing. Soil health is his thing, he's on all the big committees in the state for soil health. And so he's actually, Vince has a component of them that after you do virtual fence, I don't know if you got this call or not, but they're looking for big operations. They would call you and say, do you want to learn about carbon sequestration and carbon credits that you could get with this process as well? Doug said, sure. And so he's he's doing that now. He's got, they come out and do the soil testing to establish this baseline. And I think he's in the neighborhood of $10 to $20 an acre for carbon credits. As this develops and as the rotational grazing puts more carbon in the soil. And that's a whole nother story. Is carbon credits, people are sometimes thinking it's voodoo, snake oil and all this stuff. But anyway, we'll see how that works out. But it's why the company was formed. That's what's going to happen. But that's there. I did my job and got my boss excited, and I said, can't just be up in north central Washington, we gotta go to the south. So we went down, and I have staff down there in Ellensburg, Jordan Reichman, and she started talking with the Quick Conservation District. I don't know if anybody's here from Quick, because I haven't met that group yet, because my staff's working on it. They got excited, we gave them a presentation on it. 3 county commissions were there, and they said, we want this in our county, we want virtual towers. Well, let's figure out a way to pay for those, so all ranchers should take advantage of it, and that hasn't developed yet. But this shows where the project is gonna be. It shifted a little bit, because one rancher decided to back out. It's not exactly here now, but you can kind of see that the tower right there where the red dot is, this is the 10-mile radius going like that. And there's another tower here, and this is its 10-mile radius going like that. And so where it's a little darker green here, it has coverage in both. And then this is typical where you have these little steeper draw bottoms that don't have coverage. It's not gonna make a difference. You know, you just set your fences up differently to either keep them out of there, or once they're in there and you know they're gonna go over here, you have this fence come up behind them, you know, and then once they come back into service, they're back. You've got control of them again, and they'll take any new direction you give through the tower to the collar. And you've got them back on your home screen. Because when they disappear down there, then you don't have them on your home screen at night. Again, fraction the cost of what it would take to put real fences out there. Then I said, I'm gonna go up to Canada because we have a.
Okay, so kind of going back to the towers, at first, like you're saying, the 2 towers have line of sight, but we're looking at line of sight with the towers and collar. Okay, so if you have your unit laid out, with the cow can get out of sight of the collar and that's a hole in the vest.
Yeah,
Yeah, then they can go out, they get zapped when they go out, but they don't get zapped when they come back in.
back up. It's a hole in your ability to change the instructions that are in the collar when that cow goes out of sight of that cow, it still will shock it and beep it. But you can't change it, because it's carrying 16 moves in it that it will respond to.
How close does the cow have to get to your beam, your line of sight, before it starts deep and,
When you set up your fences, you choose as a landowner how much ground you want to give up to grading and how wide your beep zone is going to be and when it gets shot. So typically, you're going to come out so far to create that warning signal so that you're training them the shock, and that it's up to you to set that distance. They have recommendations. I don't know what they are.
is that dependent on the signal you got, the cell signal?
No.
That weak signal, you gotta be closer.
No, it would work, you know, in or out of line of sight of that tower. Once you put those instructions in, it will work, even when they're not inside of the tower. But when they pop back up, then you can change it.
So the virtual fence is working even at those drops? Is that,
What's that?
the virtual fence is gonna shock you even in that drop?
Yeah. I'm thinking that through, Leslie.
Yeah.
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 But you can't change.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, is the Grasslands National Park being proposed up in Canada? It's been fought hard by ranchers. I think one of the main reasons they fought against it is they know if it becomes a national park, they can still graze, but there may be tighter restrictions. They may be so costly to put in these type of requirements of really rotational grazing that they're gonna get kicked out. And so they fought this forever and forever. And they said, oh my gosh, we gotta go up there and give them another solution so that they're not afraid of any restrictions that might be tighter than they're used to. And there's a tool that's very affordable, and we can kind of get this turned around where ranchers aren't afraid of this park being put in place, the Grasslands National Park, and that's great, and they're not gonna take away grazing, but there's gonna be a tripartite decision based on tribes and BC parks and BC government to say how these leases are now done in a national park scenario. So why not get a cross boundary project going? And they said, it won't work in Canada, we don't have cell coverage. So I went to Vance and I said, oh yeah, they got plenty of cell coverage. And this is the map that they use. And it doesn't have to be one particular phone, it just needs cell coverage. You know, so it can be multiple cell phone services that are getting that signal back to that tower and then back to your home computer. So I said, make us a map. This is the area right here, this is the national park. And I said, just put as many towers on as it takes to get that all covered. And it was 9. I could have said, put 4 towers on and we'll accept the coverage we get, but I just wanted to know, you know, so we could talk to people about this. And this is the border, and this is where all the guys in North Okanagan County are ranching. And this is stuff that it just gets covered, and when I get talked for building a $2.5 million fence right here that burned up, and they just their mouths just went, oh, because they said, oh my gosh, you know, property played, because of 1 tower here is giving this, well, probably 2. This is a circle here. This is probably a circle here, but you can see that's, you know, let's look at it all over, that's 30 miles. So it's covering a ton of ground, it's just a little extent, and they're all in. The only problem is when Merck took over Vance was ready to go to Canada. I had them ready to go, we were gonna go up there, get through the border problems that might exist with labor and whatnot. But when Merck took them over, they pulled the horns in and said, no, we're gonna get our ship in order and just be in the States for now. But they're promising by January 24, then we can start working up there in Canada.
So to clarify, everything that's in the green will be covered by those antennas that are in Canada?
In this picture, yeah, those 9 towers covers all of this, but for our project, we're gonna narrow this down to the major area here that's gray and the major area here that's gray. And we won't need all these towers, because we're gonna come over here and put towers that shoot back across the Sinlincoln River and cover it from this direction. And that's why we want a transboundary project, because we can get so much better coverage if we're working together on both sides of the border. And Border Patrol is just a goo-goo over this, because they're like, that fence that runs between the US and Canada is terrible, it's causes all these problems, the cows get mixed up and they have to go to the border crossing and then, oh, it's just terrible. And so they're ready to fund this. So
Yeah, it won't stop the people.
that's true. Unless we could color those things.
That's amazing.
So yeah, exciting possibilities. And then this just gets back to that carbon sequestration, which I've been learning about this as we go. And if you read about the company, like I said before, this is why they started it. You know, they know, you know, grass bit once is better than grass overgrazed, is better than grass not grazed. And they know, which is neat, because they have some pretty good grading background in their company. And they know to do that, you need a lot of fences, and to do that, nobody could afford it. That's why they created it. But they're really looking at it as let's look and see how much carbon we can get back in that soil as we do this process, and then it's really going to take off, because carbon credits right now is still kind of amazing. But I think what they're talking up here is about $10 to $20 an acre. You know, 30,000 acres, that's not bad. Something to think about, anyway. This is the contact information. John Abizier, he's the Director of Business Development. There's his number and email. Like I said, they got taken over by Merck, so now it's an @merck.com email. CK Friedenberg, she is the herd management software coordinator. Probably a little hard to get a hold of right about now, because it's expanded so much, but like I say, the way to actually learn more about it from a ranching perspective is to go to the herd management workshops every Tuesday. But I can get that to Alyssa, and then you can put it out so everybody has it. And then Ben Berees is the data back carbon credit program of Vance. And these are the 3 main people that, you know, there's other folks involved too. Cody is one of the people that comes out, really neat kid, probably 25, he's a kid. But they come out and help put the towers up and install.
Do you guys work with, sounds like you work with mostly like full-time ranchers, have you worked with any, like cover crop grazing, setup at all yet with these fences?
Douglas, the one I have, he's got the 30,000, about half of that is cover crops. And he's got it now with electric fences around it, and he's gonna overtop with the electric fences and with virtual and divide them a lot more into more pastures. So that's our biggest test project that I know of that's doing a lot of grazing on crop ground and aftermath on crop ground as well as range ground. I think I was trying to say this, but I didn't get it said. Vince originally said we'd like to see 500 head before we come. We were sending them so much business through the proviso as well as projects we were doing. They said, if you can get a group that's in the same general location with about 500 head, we'll try. You know, because their costs go up for every landowner they have to service and have herd manager talk with and whatnot. So that was initially what they were looking at. But, you know, they're growing exponentially now. I don't know, they started out when we were talking to them, they maybe had 10 or 15 staff. I don't know what they have now, but a lot more. Since Merck took them over.
Is that Vince with the V?
Yep, VENCE. That's my puppy. Rita said, don't tell your puppy. My wife said, you always tell your puppy. I go, listen, this is okay. Sorry about that. Growing up now. So any other questions? I don't know what time we're at.
We got,
I have a question.
Yeah.
So what's the scenario when another wildfire sweeps through these virtual fence areas?
So, you have the capacity to drop all fences, you know, where just let animals run, so that's an advantage. The towers should be put on a ranch insurance policy, but they burn up, we've got those covered. Then would be right back out there to help put them up again and get them all set up, or like, they're not that hard. I mean, for $10,000, you do it yourself, and it's not all that hard. The part where you actually connect into the signal and you call Vince down in San Diego and say, okay, we're out here, hook us up. But people do it, but they just say $2,500, they're not having Vince send people out. They hire people in, whatever, put the towers together. We've done that, done out in hell. But, you know, after that, if a fire comes through, you know, hopefully you've got a better capacity to get animals out. You're gonna get, you'd be at a point where we've got to drop those fences before it burns up your tower. That's the only I can think of. But you can recover from it pretty quickly as opposed to the months and years that it takes to go to FSA or NRCS cost share programs, you know, and have to go out and build fence again. So, that to me is where it really tended to take off in people's minds, though, they don't want to have to rebuild for fences. It's harder when you've got a perfectly good fence out there and you're saying like, well, you know, I don't want to tear it down. And so people will virtual fence over the top of them. You know, but at some point that lifespan is going to come up, and so then again, you're ahead of the game. It's probably, you know, just if you think through the whole aspect of this and as it grows, to me, it's the most exciting thing I've seen in the world of conservation, whether it was working for NRCS or not for conservation of West, come along in my whole career, that's 44 years of doing this stuff. That's why I'm not retired. It's too much fun. I'm enjoying it. And get to give talks to nice people. and really, I hope you get some excitement out of this and some inquisitiveness and want to go learn for yourself what works and doesn't work, and, you know, talk to people that have done it. And it's not perfect. It's not a perfect system. There's no, you know, I cannot say that, but it's got so much capacity and potential to do so much good and give landowners really an economical way to treat the land how I think most of them always know it should be treated, but, you know, there's always a cost to do it, you know, and
have you heard it is, I'm just thinking of now the application to the ranchers, but also thinking about like the potential use on bison to keep the bison in the park with the brucellosis issue, like in Montana and stuff. Have they talked about other applications other than a grazing standpoint, or Africa where they're trying to keep rhinos within a park and safer from poachers and like, there's just seems to be a lot of different application potential.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that, but I don't see why they wouldn't think about it. You know, that shock beat would have to be a little stronger on a buffalo.
Yeah, yeah.
And, people, the animal rights people will say, well, this is cruel. It's like a third of the shock of a normal electric shock. But it's a training. And I think some of the people that have had, listening to that herd manager, some of the people that tended to have problems, skip the training part of it. And they come out right after you've put them in this confined area to begin with, and give them some time to get used to this whole PPT shock, and then most of them will have it, recognize it, not all of them will. But, and then you also get into the concept of, we're kind of messing with Mother Nature by coloring the wild animal.
Mhm. Yeah. I was just thinking like any of the busy up the wild horses, like are they just wondered if they thought even other livestock types besides cows, not necessarily those specific topics.
I imagine they have, I haven't heard, I think we can talk to John in the bird garden in August, see if they're doing anything. I immediately thought of a sheep situation.
That's what I think.
Wild sheep, native, domestic sheep, like, it's gotta be. Like,
Yeah, health or health.
yeah, that's devastating, wild sheep birds and, yeah.
TJ, are we doing the major upgrade in 2024 for the collar, sorry, technology wise? Is that?
Yeah, that was coming out probably in January, and what we're hearing will be different. There'll be a lot of technology added to the collar for animal health. So you'll be able to know if it's stressed, you'll be able to know if it's in heat, you'll be able to know a bunch of different stuff. Also, everybody's tired of taking two little screws off and losing them in the dirt and changing your battery. It's a pain. And you should, come on, it's gotta be like a flashlight. Screw it off, pop the flashlight battery in. In fact, where you can change your battery and not take the collar off. I think once changed, let's see.
You know, I see that if you're out there on the range and all of a sudden you've got a large amount of cattle or even one who collar is no longer working, well, they put them on in a fish chute. So now you're asking somebody to go out there and try to work that cow.
I would bet money that the collars won't be obsolete that are on your cow. It's that when you change out the next season, if you've already got them on, you'll get the newer version.
I mean, I think the ear tag, I think they could do a system that was implanted in the ear tag as well.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's small, I mean, eventually we may get there, but it's small, it's all cattle or tag. And it would be something that, yeah.
I think, and I don't know, but the size of it, a lot has to depend on what it can do, and the GPS component of it is huge. You know, for them to know where their cow is most of the time is a big thing, as well as the shock beat. But, I don't think they'll be able to get to that small and do what they need to do. But the increased capacity of what they're gonna put in those collars, I think we're gonna see pretty soon.
Any of these projects and stuff has been in consideration on the open range, restricted range, liability of the cows. Like the counties kind of stepped up, you know, or the ranchers concerned about their insurance.
I don't think so, because nothing changed from a regular barbed wire fence there, you know, and open range policies and all that. So, and if you choose to not use a hard fence as a perimeter, maybe if you're saying, I'm gonna rely on the virtual, but even if you're relying on a hard fence, animals still get through it. So animals can get through a virtual, animals can get through a barbed wire. So there's not a huge difference.
So my recommendation is you're going to utilize the virtual fence as your perimeter, or your fire fences, your fences are all gone. So then, you know, I know most of the projects are pretty rural areas, big open range areas, but
I guess I haven't heard of any big litigation things popping up, you know, and I try to listen to that herd manager when I can, and this morning I missed it because I was spraining my ankle on the tractor. But if you listen to that, you'll hear those.
if you're utilizing that, you know, big communities like the Douglas County one, if you still build those permanent fences along roads, down the road, the state road, you can still internally, you know,
Right.
acres to utilize, but Will this technology can get down to do the 200 acre crop field, if they can, quick graze or cover crop in 2 weeks, not have to have a permit special.
Yeah, and I know like what Doug is planning on, some of his perimeter fences on those crop fields is what he used to do with a one strand electric, and it worked fine, but these aren't busy roads, Douglas County roads, see cars for a long way. But, now and then they burned up. So now he's gonna still go back to that one strand electric with a vertical over the top. And he feels, and we'll see that, everything's a trial right now. People are just this grazing season, getting out in Washington to actually put it on the ground, except for the Wilsons, which went last year. And so that's one of the things we're gonna be making a film about, going around and interviewing some people, interview you and you'll say, well, that didn't work. and but we want the real story and people's impression of it, how it works, how it didn't work, what they think of it. When I ask Joey and Mike about it now, they go, we are so thankful for this and how it changed their lifestyle. They don't have to go and do so many things they used to do in checking on animals. They can see it from their living room. They love that. And they're getting used to the idea of how they can change their rotational grazing system, which that's gonna take time. If you've done it one way forever, it's gonna take some time before you can say, no, I have not the capacity to do blah, blah, blah. And the other thing you need, I think, to do this is you need a Joy Wilson or a Leslie or a grandkid that isn't afraid of a computer program. A lot of our ranchers, oh man, they would send their grandkids to the training we had at Mike and Joy's place. They go, oh yeah, don't worry, Grandpa, we got it. And you can talk about that over beers with you guys about the learning process. It's not perfect, but it's, I think, Doug, when he saw the training on it, said, oh, this is miles ahead of what he has to put up with the John Deere, programs that he runs for fertilizer and whatnot. So, but it's, still, you gotta get used to this. And then I noticed this, when you go to herd manager and a rancher complains, the people there they're the engineers that develop the program. They're taking notes. Okay, yeah, we're going to work on that. So it's evolving really fast, getting better.
Yeah, I would say that it's new technology, and we have this discussion at my house, where, it's brand new technology, where some of the people who are just doing this, and where we'll be in 2 years, is going to be very different. And I don't think right now it's necessarily for the faint of heart or the skeptical. I really believe people who are implementing it now have to believe that this is gonna work just because of where the technology is at. And I think, by 2024, that's gonna be very different. But that's my perception of how it's gone on our farm is there's still some kinks. We had a bunch of cows getting out, and I had a meeting with vets on Monday morning, and they said, oh yeah, we just found out there's a bug in all the modems, so we're gonna send you new modems. And so that way you're not having this problem that we kept having. Well, everybody was having that problem. So it's been a really awesome company to work with because they're so responsive. They keep growing staff, so every couple months there's new person, but it's super cool technology.
And Leslie, she actually looked into this right after the fire, the Pearl Hill fire. But it was too new. They couldn't find anybody that you could talk to about it. And they were at the time were just back working with Leo on the pilot stuff, I think. So it took a while. It took about a year before we could start making the connections. The neat thing is though, that one slide where I show you how fast it's expanded. So it's over 140, actual projects on the ground with under hundreds of thousands, probably millions of acres now. They've got 8 research projects going on at different universities, New Mexico, Arizona, Wyoming, and Colorado. And it's just.
Can do time check. We got 5 minutes for other questions.
Just one more question from online. Do you think this will lead to ranchers grazing areas on their land that shouldn't be grazed, like sensitive areas?
I think of it as the opposite. It gives them a tool to keep out of those areas and keep out of trouble from government agencies that don't want you in there economically. You know, that is my thought, and I believe that, you know, like riparian areas is a good example. So much forage there. You know, there's been an excuse that we don't put fences up, we don't get in there and get DOE mad at it. I don't think so. It's just too expensive to put those fences out there. Most people would say, sure, we'll protect that riparian area. You gotta have a place to drink. And that's really gonna be the key to it all, is the water, developments, because you're gonna have to, you have so much capacity now subdivided into those smaller pastures and do a much faster rotational grazing and have more opportunity to rest, you know, because you're doing it. The house has always talked about doing it over all the years I've been within NRCS. There's always rotational grazing, you know, and going back to savory. Well, now savory's kind of fallen out of favor, but the concept is good. Is, you know, you go to places where they were doing it on the spoken wheel and stuff, and it just didn't fit our landscape typically. We have fewer towns out there than they do in the Midwest. You know, and I could go to Montana and see a demonstration of, you know, rotational system that was really small pastures and it seemed to work. They have, you know, different grass that grows out there, full season grass.
Is there, are they getting a software package that they're working off of when they're putting their fences, or like, are they like, I'm trying to figure out, like, you know, can you measure a buffer distance on a riparian area where you're gonna place your fence? To be able to do that on, right?
Yep. And it's not software, it's a web application,
Okay,
and I'm sure they don't have an app yet. But I'm sure, again, we'll see that in the next year and a half. That, you know, so people can manage it from their phones.
that's what I was wondering too, then, is you go out there and check and you're like, oh, I better back it off a little bit here based on whatever's happening, and you can like boop, 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 tweak it in the field and off you go.
Well, one thing I remember Mike saying is that the map base, maybe you know more than that, but the map base on the computer sometimes doesn't give you the exact spot. You can put a pin on a map, but he likes to go out on the horse and get a GPS. So that's where I want that corner to be, and then call it back into Joy, and she puts it on there, and then he goes and gets another point. But I don't have personal experience in that.
Yeah, it seems like the boundaries are off a little bit. So I mean, even if you can look at GPS and you can draw it right along the fence line. And maybe this modem will fit that. Have cows that are not, like, they look like they're outside of the fence. You know, so some of that stuff I think will improve, or maybe we need to go GPS points. Maybe that's the solution.
And it is point to point, so you don't do a lot of curves.
Awesome. Last one more question before we wrap it up.
All right, it's the future. You guys are gonna do it.